My name is Siler Monroe, 28 years old from Tallahassee, Florida. I thought I inherited a mansion, but what I really got was a curse, sealed behind 13 locked doors and generations of lies. And by the time I realized the truth, it was already too late to walk away. Before we dive into this chilling tale of betrayal and dark inheritance, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more stories that'll keep you up at night. Now, let's unlock the first door. I didn't even know I had a great uncle until the day the letter came. It was a thick cream envelope, the kind lawyers use when they want you to take something seriously. Embossed in gold, Gibbons, Field Reynard, Tallahassee, Florida. Inside was a formal will, a hand-signed letter, and a deed with my name on it. Siler Monroe. According to the papers, I'd inherited an estate from a man named Nolan R. Monroe, my late father's uncle, whom I'd never met, never heard of, and honestly thought was just a southern myth my dad used to scare me straight. A recluse. A ghost in the family tree. The catch came on page 3, the heir must remain within the bounds of Monroe Estate for 13 consecutive nights from the date of first entry. Should they fail to do so, the property and all assets will transfer to the secondary heir. It felt like a dare. Stay in a mansion for 13 nights? Sure. How hard could it be? By the time I reached the rusting iron gates of the Monroe Estate, dusk was already falling. The house stood at the top of a sloping drive, half swallowed by Spanish moss and wild magnolia. Its frame was tall and narrow, flanked by stone angels that had long since eroded into something less than holy. I keyed in the code sent by the lawyer. The gates moaned as they opened. I drove through slowly, the gravel crackling under my tires like bones. The house looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. The windows were dark. The shutters creaked with every breeze. But the key turned smoothly in the lock. Inside, the air smelled of cedar, mothballs, and something older, something stale. I stepped into the foyer, where a grand staircase wound up into shadow and a chandelier loomed like a threat overhead. The lights flickered once before settling into a dim, amber glow. There were portraits on every wall, stern-faced men in military uniforms, women with eyes that followed you from room to room. One face in particular made my stomach twist. It was my father, as a young man. Clean-cut. Smiling. The opposite of how I remembered him. I found the bedroom already prepared. Sheets folded. Firewood stacked. A handwritten note on the nightstand read, "To Siler Monroe, you made it. Welcome. You are not alone." No signature. No date. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the old pipes sounded like footsteps. At 3:12 a.m. exactly, the front gate creaked open, though no motion sensor, no light, no camera showed anyone there, but something told me, the house knew I had arrived. And it was waiting to see if I'd last all 13 nights. Or if I'd leave like the ones before me. By the third night, I had memorized every groan of the floorboards, every flicker of light the chandelier gave off when the wind moved through the eaves. I told myself the house was just old. That ghosts were for stories, not lawyers' wills, but denial only works until you see something that shouldn't be there. It happened in the upstairs bathroom. I'd left the faucet running to let the steam warm the air. When I came back, the mirror was completely fogged over, except for a single clear spot in the center. Someone had wiped it clean. I hadn't touched it. I stepped closer, heart ticking faster than it should. The face that stared back at me wasn't mine. Same position, same angle, but a man in his 30s, maybe older, stared out through sunken eyes and a face marked by burns or rot. His mouth moved, lips forming words I couldn't hear. I blinked, and it was gone. Just my reflection now. Pale. Shaken. That night, I searched every room for hidden projectors, cameras, anything that could explain what I'd seen. Instead, I found something much worse, a trapdoor beneath a loose floorboard in the upstairs library. The wood groaned as I lifted it, revealing a narrow storage space lined with dust-caked boxes. At the bottom sat a leather-bound journal, warped with age and dampness. NRM. Was engraved into the cover, Nolan R. Monroe. I opened it carefully. Most pages were faded beyond legibility. But near the back, one entry had survived: the house is more than timber and stone. It remembers. It chooses. I made a mistake once, gave too much to someone who took everything. If it chooses Siler, he must know, inheritance isn't the same as trust. I turned the page. Another entry, scrawled more erratically: he found the hidden door. I didn't think he'd come back. But he did. And now he wants it all again. If you're reading this, Siler, don't trust the blood that calls itself your family. I froze. The words circled in my head like vultures. Someone had come before me. Someone from my family. And Nolan hadn't trusted them. So why did he trust me? Suddenly, the lights went out. Complete blackness swallowed the room. My phone's flashlight flickered twice before stabilizing, then I heard it, right behind me, a whisper, close enough to feel on my neck: wrong blood. Wrong choice. I turned. No one. The mirror in the library, cracked, cloudy, showed only my face this time. But something else had appeared behind my reflection: a door I hadn't seen before. One that didn't belong on any blueprint I'd studied. I closed the journal, tucked it under my arm, and took a slow step forward. The house had opened something, and now I had no choice but to follow where it led. The east wing had always been sealed off. Thick iron locks. Chained doorknobs. Even the hinges looked welded into place. I'd assumed the decay made it dangerous, until I found the journal. Nolan's final pages weren't just ramblings. They were warnings. And coordinates. A sketched floor plan marked an old maintenance passage behind the kitchen pantry. I waited until the house was quiet, past midnight, before prying loose the shelf panel that led to it. The air inside was stale, metallic. Dust choked the narrow hall. My flashlight caught old claw marks on the wood paneling, scratches. Not from tools, but from hands. Human or otherwise, I wasn't sure. The passage ended behind a warped cabinet in the east wing's parlor. I kicked it outward and stepped into a room sealed in time. Dust veiled everything like a shroud. The curtains were moth-eaten. The fireplace stuffed with bricks and blackened wood, but the desk, ornate, claw-footed, and oddly untouched, was what pulled me in. Inside its drawer were folders, each labeled meticulously in my great-uncle's handwriting. Deeds. Trusts. Contracts. One manila envelope was stamped, "Attempted fraud, December 1999, inside, I found what I wasn't ready for, a forged will, nearly identical to the one I had received, except this one named my father, Malcolm Monroe, and my cousin Laurel Hemsley as co-heirs. I scanned the signatures. Nolan's was a shaky imitation, obviously forged. I wouldn't have noticed if not for the side-by-side comparison Nolan himself had left behind. There was also a letter, unsigned, but clearly written in my father's sharp, neat hand: "Laurel has agreed. The old man won't last the year. Once we get access, burn the eastern wing. There can be no record of the prior trust." I dropped the paper. My blood went cold. That's why the wing was sealed. Not because it was unsafe, but because it held the truth. Brick dust clung to my boots as I stepped toward the bricked-up fireplace. Something about it looked off. The cement had been hastily applied, like whoever did it wanted the job done before someone walked in. I picked up a broken poker and chipped at the edge. Within seconds, dust and ash coughed into the room, and behind the last loose brick, a metal box clattered onto the hearth. Inside, Polaroids. Photos of my father and Laurel standing in front of the mansion, years ago, holding champagne flutes and grinning like wolves. One photo had 10 minutes before the fire scrawled in red ink on the back. So they'd tried to take it. They'd tried to burn the evidence, rewrite the will, and erase me from history. But Nolan had known. He'd sealed the truth behind brick and silence, and now, I was the only one left who had it. But if they'd failed once, how long before they tried again? the photo arrived just past midnight. I heard the rustle first, an envelope sliding under the front door. No footsteps, no knock, just that soft hiss of paper against tile. I crept down the staircase barefoot, each wooden step groaning like a reluctant witness. When I reached the foyer, the envelope sat in the moonlight like it had been waiting all night. There was no address. No stamp. Just my name, Siler, scrawled across the front in black ink that had bled from dampness. Inside, a single Polaroid and a note. The photo was a shot of the mansion's east wing, taken from outside, recently. You could tell by the overgrowth in the corner, the angle of the broken second-floor window. But it wasn't the wing that held my breath hostage, it was the figure standing in front of it, a woman. Shoulders back. Arms folded. Face partially obscured by shadow, but familiar, Laurel. I hadn't seen her since I was a child. My cousin. My almost sister. The last time we spoke, she'd dared me to jump from the estate's second-floor balcony during a family cookout. I'd broken my wrist. She'd laughed. The note was worse. You think you're the only one with a key? Some doors were never yours to open. Close them, or we'll do it for you. It wasn't signed, but I knew. Laurel had been here. Maybe still was. Suddenly, I wasn't alone in this house. Maybe I never had been. I ran to check the locks. Every door, secured. Windows latched. Security cameras I hadn't noticed before blinked red. Had they always been active? I pulled the heavy curtains closed, my heart pounding with the knowledge that someone had stood outside my home. In the dark, and left this message like a wolf marking territory. Back upstairs, I opened Nolan's journal again, thumbing past the brittle entries until I reached one I'd missed before. It was dated the year before his death. She came again tonight. Laurel. Thought I didn't see her. But I know that silhouette. The girl has his blood, Malcolm's instincts. She wants the house. Wants what she thinks I stole, but it was never hers. It was never his. It was always Siler's. I sank into the armchair, the journal open in my lap and the photo burning a hole in my thoughts. If Laurel still believed she had a claim, and if she'd once helped forge a will and torch the truth, then this wasn't about inheritance anymore. It was about power, and I was standing on ground soaked in generations of betrayal. From somewhere deep in the walls, I heard movement, slow, deliberate. Not the house settling. Not pipes, footsteps, and then, faintly, just outside my window, a whisper, night 4. She arrived just after sunset. I watched from the study window as a black sedan rolled up the gravel drive like it owned the land beneath it. The iron gates hadn't opened, she'd come in another way. One I hadn't found yet. Laurel Hemsley stepped out in heels too expensive for this much dust and attitude too sharp for a family visit. Her hair was darker now, slicked into a high knot, and she wore a slate-gray suit like she was about to negotiate a hostile takeover. Which, I supposed, she was. I met her at the front door. She didn't wait for an invitation. Well, she said, brushing past me like she never lost a battle, at least you didn't burn it down. Yet. Laurel, I said flatly, you weren't invited. She dropped her bag on the floor and peeled off her sunglasses with practiced flair. Funny. Neither were you. But here we are. Her eyes landed on the foyer, taking it all in, like she was measuring the walls, the angles, the echoes. You know, Uncle Nolan always said this house would be the death of someone. We used to think he meant himself. I said nothing. My fists clenched involuntarily. I couldn't let her get under my skin. Not after the photo. Not after the note. Why are you here? I asked. She turned to me, smiling with no warmth at all. Let's call it a courtesy call. You've stirred up old ghosts. I thought I'd offer you some guidance. I arched an eyebrow. Guidance? Or warnings? Maybe both. She wandered into the parlor like she belonged there. Brushing dust off the back of the sofa. You found the documents, didn't you? The forged will. The photos. You think that gives you power? It gives me proof, I snapped. Proof of what? She said, tilting her head. That family betrays family. That our fathers tried to outmaneuver an old man with more secrets than assets. We were kids, Siler. I didn't sign anything. I was just promised things. Promised by who? Her smile faded. You think Nolan left you this house because he loved you? She asked, voice suddenly low. You're a pawn. You always were. He just hated my father more. I stared at her. So you came here to what? Intimidate me? Warn me off? She walked up, close enough that I could smell the sharp scent of perfume and malice. I came to remind you that not all inheritances are blessings. Some are traps. Some are burdens. She slipped something into my hand, a key, antique and rusted, to the greenhouse, she whispered. It's where the real secrets are. Then she turned and walked out the same way she came, disappearing into the growing dark. As I stood there, key cold in my palm, I realized something terrifying. Laurel didn't come to stop me. She came to see if I was strong enough to finish what Nolan started. The mansion was quiet, too quiet, for the 13th night. Wind scratched against the stained glass windows like fingernails on a coffin lid. Shadows stretched longer than they should have, curling at the corners of rooms I'd already explored and feared. The house seemed to pulse with breath I couldn't hear, only feel. Like it had been waiting for this moment. Watching, at 11:42 p.m., my phone rang. Dad. I stared at the name for a second, frozen. I hadn't heard his voice in over a year, not since he vanished into silence after my mother's funeral. I pressed play on the voicemail with trembling fingers. Siler, it's Malcolm. Don't stay. I don't know how they found you, or why he left it to you, but listen to me, the 13th night isn't symbolic. It's a ritual. Laurel doesn't care about the inheritance. She wants the house to choose her. She'll do anything to, static. A long screech. Then, don't let it feed on you. The message cut off. I stood in the main hall, heart pounding. The house groaned beneath my feet, like it heard every word. I didn't need more proof. This wasn't a home. It was a trap sealed in hardwood and whispers. Still, I couldn't leave. The will was clear, 13 uninterrupted nights, or forfeit everything. But it wasn't just about money anymore. It was about truth, and survival. The lights flickered at midnight. The grandfather clock chimed once. Then twice. Then stopped, and the walls shifted. I don't mean metaphorically. I heard it, the moaning slide of stone on stone. A seam opened in the west hallway where there hadn't been a door before. Inside was darkness so deep. It swallowed my flashlight beam whole, but I went in. Steps descended into what looked like a root cellar, but deeper, colder. At the bottom, I found a circular chamber lined with cracked marble and iron sconces. In the center stood a pedestal, and on it, a family ledger. I approached, pulse slamming in my throat. The first page listed every heir of the Monroe estate going back nearly 200 years. Nolan's name was last. Mine had been etched in, freshly inked. And still wet, but there was another name beneath it, Laurel Hemsley. The ink on hers had already dried. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. The house doesn't belong to one. It chooses the survivor. Behind me, the stone door began to close. I lunged for the stairs, but someone, was already blocking the way. Laurel stood in the doorway, dressed in black, eyes burning with intent. She didn't speak, she simply whispered, "Let's see who it chooses." And sealed us both inside. We never spoke of what happened in the underground chamber. Laurel disappeared the moment the door reopened at dawn. No words, no explanation, only the bitter silence of a game she hadn't finished playing, but something had changed. The house was no longer resisting me. Doors that had groaned and stuck now opened with ease. The air felt lighter, less suffocating. As if the mansion had made its choice. I didn't waste time. Back upstairs, I locked myself in Nolan's study and unsealed the tin box I'd retrieved earlier. Inside were everything I needed: the original trust, Nolan's handwritten amendments, notarized proof of my inheritance, and damning evidence of years of fraud, photos, signatures, letters from my father and Laurel outlining their plan to steal the estate and bury the truth. Even a voice recording from Nolan himself, dated just weeks before his death: "If this house lands in Malcolm's hands, it becomes a tomb. He has no legacy left in him, only greed. If Silo returns, if he proves himself, give him the fire. Let him decide how it burns." That fire started with exposure. I sent scanned copies of the forged documents to every legal entity Nolan had ever worked with, including the estate lawyer who'd first called me. I attached evidence of the fake will, Laurel's handwriting analysis, and the ledger showing Laurel's name crossed out in Nolan's own hand. Then I leaked it all to the press. It didn't take long for the storm to hit. By day 3, headlines rippled across Tallahassee: "Monroe estate fraud uncovered, years of lies, stolen trusts, and family deceit." By day 5, my father was fired from his consulting firm. His assets were frozen pending investigation. His name, once whispered with reverence, was now paired with words like embezzlement, perjury, and conspiracy to defraud. He called me twice. I didn't answer. On the 6th day, he showed up at the gates of the mansion. I stood on the balcony, watching him yell my name like it still meant something. His eyes were wild, hair unkempt, fists beating against iron bars. He looked small, shriveled. "I built this house." He screamed. "No," I whispered. "You just tried to steal it." I turned away and walked back inside. That was the last time I saw Malcolm Monroe. Later that evening, I signed the final set of papers disowning any legal or familial connection to him. I changed the name on the estate from the Monroe House to Ashward Hall, a name Nolan had scribbled once in a margin, beside the words, "For the one who survives the fire." The mansion had chosen me, but it had come at a cost I could never repay: blood, silence, and the ruin of a family name. It was tucked behind a false panel in Nolan's old roll-top desk. I hadn't noticed it before, probably because the desk only locked with a brass key I found inside the fireplace mantel hours earlier. The lock clicked open with a hollow finality, and the drawer slid out to reveal a single item: a thick ivory envelope, brittle with age, sealed with dark red wax and stamped with the Monroe family crest. My name was written across the front in Nolan's unmistakable script: "To Siler, and only Siler." I hesitated before opening it. After everything, the lies, the manipulation, the inheritance that had cost me my father, my cousin, and any illusion of family, I wasn't sure I wanted to know more, but I opened it anyway. The letter was dated 13 months before Nolan's death. If you're reading this, it means the house has chosen. I pray it chose well. You now possess the documents to destroy the name that nearly destroyed you. That is your revenge. But I offer you something else now: purpose. The real cost of inheritance. This house has always protected its own, when the right soul lives within. But every generation, someone tries to abuse its power. Your father tried. Laurel tried. Others before them. The house is older than the city. Older than our line. And it remembers. Inside the west wing, beneath the grandfather clock, is a vault. Use the code hidden in the ledger. Inside are journals, blueprints, and other things. Things you are now responsible for keeping hidden. The city must never know. The family must never return. If the house is abandoned, the curse will return. It always does. The last time it was left empty, 3 generations died in less than a decade. Fire. Madness. Disappearance. You can sell the land. Change the name. Rebuild the walls. But the secrets must stay buried, and guarded. If you walk away now, everything you know and everyone you love will suffer. This house will find a way to remind you. It always does. The last line was underlined in faded black ink. To inherit the Monroe estate is not to own it, but to keep it contained. I dropped the letter on the desk and leaned back, breath short, this wasn't an ending. It was an invitation to prison, a beautifully gilded one with chandeliers, oak staircases, and cursed foundations. I thought I'd won. That I'd reclaimed something noble. But Nolan had left me not a home, not wealth, he'd left me a watchtower. I could burn the family name. I could cut ties. But I couldn't walk away from what lay under this house, not without consequences. I looked toward the west wing, where the old clock still ticked. The mansion had made its choice, now it was my turn to choose, protect its secrets. Or risk awakening something far worse than betrayal, and the 13th night was only the beginning. They stopped calling it the Monroe House after the scandal. Reporters moved on, the lawsuits dried up, and the gates were closed to the public. The estate stood silent, its towering frame casting long shadows across the overgrown lawn. To the world, it was just another haunted relic of southern grandeur. To me, it was still alive. It's been 7 months since the 13th night. Since I found the letter. Since I swore to keep Ashworth's secrets buried beneath brick, dust, and my own unraveling sanity. I live alone now. No staff. No visitors. Just the creaks of a house that never truly sleeps. At first, I thought the strange happenings were remnants of stress. Sleepwalking through corridors I didn't remember entering. Lights flickering in rooms I'd long since locked. Dreams that turned into memories I shouldn't have, names I never heard whispered with a strange familiarity, but then came the voices, faint. Muffled. Always after midnight, they murmured from the walls of the west wing, soft and cold like breath across skin. I tried sealing the vault, changing the passcode, even blocking the grandfather clock with heavy furniture. But every morning, it was reset. The hands ticking in reverse. Always counting down, the mansion hadn't finished with me. One night, I found muddy footprints leading from the east wing to the library, bare feet, too small to be mine. They stopped at the hearth where Nolan's portrait once hung. Now it was just empty wall. Another night, I woke to find every mirror in the house shattered, as if the house didn't want me to see myself anymore. This wasn't legacy. It was possession. I tried to leave, twice. Packed a bag, drove halfway to Pensacola before my car died in the middle of a clear, dry road. The mechanic said the engine had flooded. But the fear in his eyes told me he saw something else when he lifted the hood. I got the message. I came back. I still get letters from Laurel. Postcards from nowhere, no return address, no explanation. Just cryptic phrases. You think the house picked you? It only keeps what it feeds on. Sometimes I believe her. I used to think the curse was metaphor. Guilt. Trauma. But now I know better. This house doesn't want peace. It doesn't want justice. It wants memory. It wants presence. It wants a keeper who will never look away. Never forget, and so, I walk the halls every night, whispering the names in the ledger aloud, as if that will keep the walls quiet. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. I've accepted that I'll never leave. This is my inheritance, not marble staircases or dusty riches, but the weight of a legacy that was never meant to be passed down, only contained, and now, it lives through me. Thanks for watching to the end. If this story kept you hooked, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a twist. And tell me in the comments, would you have stayed in that mansion? Let's talk.